ആസേതു ഹിമാചലം മുഴങ്ങി പാഞ്ചജന്യം 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 പാഞ്ചജന്യം.
I wish I can speak in Malayalam, but my apologies. When a child is born, the joy of the family is splendid. And when a child utters the first cry, the joy of the mother is immeasurable. And when you go for Vidyarambam, there are a lot of expectations. I think the Karnataka chapter of Panchajanyam today is composed of all of this. The joy of the family, the joy of the mother, and the great expectations of the nation. I greet each and every one of you here. Firstly, my dear sisters, the repositories of motherhood in our country. Something which is not replicated elsewhere. And everyone else present here today. And I think, having said that, I wish you a great journey in the common pursuit of Dharma. Swami Vivekananda had written extensively. His speeches are mesmerizing. He appeals to elevate the Hindu religion as a vision of life, beyond the way of life, or the vision of life, is something exemplary. And in one of his speeches, he tells us that we are Amritasya Putraha, children of immortality. He talks about us. So when I got an invitation to come and speak on this occasion, I was wondering, what have I got to say on this huge ocean of knowledge on which people like Vivekananda have spoken. But Panchajanyam has a certain emotive appeal. It appeals not only to your mind, it appeals to your soul. So what is this Amritams which Vivekananda was talking about? If you are children of immortality, probably we must have with us a wide range of Amritams with us. Let us look at few of them. As I said, this country's knowledge, wisdom, its inheritance is so vast. It's very difficult to capsulate it in a few minutes. I don't want to say that no other civilization in the world is equal to Indian civilization. That's a very contentious issue. We don't need to do that at all. Because every people all over this world, every civilization, every country has their own heritage, wisdom, and their own importance, and we must respect them. That's why even Vivekananda says, which Gandhiji also said sometime, let winds blow all over my house, but my house will remain the same. So when he said Amritams, let me look at some of the Amritams. Before I do that, Samskara, they will look at the word Samskarams. There are several words and idioms in our language which not have English equivalent. Dharma does not have an English equivalent. So Samskaram or Sanskar is one such word. If you go to literature, you will find by this word impressions of mind, recollections of mind, memory, so on and so forth. But it can also mean something beyond that. And what is that? Putting together, accomplishing well, getting ready, making perfect. Look at these meanings of samskarams and sanskar. So many schools of Indian thought, religion or philosophy, invoke this samskara theory to explain how and why human beings know anything and expects anything or undergoes frustration, fulfillment, joy, so on and so forth, how we make choices, and ultimately what each one of us are. So we are looking at, as Panchajanya Bharatam, I think we have assembled here, we will continue to assemble in many other places in times to come. To do what? To understand that Panchajanyam is looking at the national thoughts, national tendencies, national dispositions, and the national aspirations. Therefore, it is important for us to first talk of the refinement of our individual inner consciousness. The poetry piece which Damodar just recited to us is ultimately talking about the refinement of our inner consciousness. And Vedanta calls it something called being preparedness. Be prepared, be ready. So every moment of our life, we have to prepare something better, good, holy. How do we do that? So while we look at our national treasures, it's also important that we do not waste them away. When you're talking of caste, creed, etc., I think diversity is a law of nature. Nature without diversity, I think, would be dull and inconceivable. If only Venkatramani all over the world will be dull. So, if nature is diversity, the infinite forms and manifestations of nature, of life and existence, is nature's curriculum. We need a curriculum for our schools, no? Nature has its own curriculum. We need to know the curriculum of nature, which is diversity. Mystics belonging to all possible faiths, whether Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, say whatever it is. So that glimpses of these wonderful diversities of nature and are given to us chronicles of their life and experiences. And that is not only something which has happened recently, but over long periods of time. And it all happened when today we talk of English people colonizing our country. We talk of colonization of mind. So all those things happened before the mind was colonized. People were free to know what is truth and to communicate what is truth. So that is all happened before technology has taken over. I'll just digress for a minute here today. Today Google has become our Ishtadevata. Facebook has become our great neighbor. So we have all those technology virtually entering into our mind and beginning to rule our mind. Maybe it's a boon because I'm able to fly from here to US in less than 10 hours. Maybe in think of a second, we can communicate with each other. But why I want to talk about technology in this context is that while the world is shrinking by means of technology, our mind's enlargement due to technology is not happening. So we also become slaves of technology. Every important aspect, talk of Bharatiya culture, samskar, etc. Let us be very, very alive to this. So people have started writing about how our minds, which can lean backward into the past and pick up the treasures of our past, is now virtually prevented from doing so by a variety of reasons, and technology is one among them. But we are fortunate as children of Bharata to have been bestowed thousands of years of tested knowledge and spiritual wisdom, virtually concerning every aspect of life, gathered in sayings of a long line of seers, saints, and rishis, and so on and so forth. I don't want to draw a line between the riches which has been given to us by any school or philosophy or religion, be it Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, Islam. We don't need to get into that at all. But however, as Panchajanyam, we want to plunge into the national treasures afresh every day, every moment, so that our mind is alert to what we are called upon to do for ourselves and for the rest of the humanity. So every generation, I think, has a dharmic task. Every generation has dharmic tasks. We cannot remain stagnated in the past, but change cannot do so without knowing what are eternal permanent values for all of us. So stagnation on the one hand, but change on the other hand. How do we really change? Our treasures tell us how do we change. We need to know them. So one most important fact of the distinction between Indian and non-Indian traditions of thoughts, I think, is this. We are free to learn, to regard, and to choose what appeals to me, what appeals to you. Nobody tells you, please, choose this. So there is no dictation from outside. We are free to do so. There are no hierarchies in our faiths and religions. There is nothing called Advaita superior, Advaita inferior. No. All of us are equal ways of looking at the ways of life. And that is, and I think the diversity of a country, in my understanding, is therefore not chaos, but a living synthesis. It's a living synthesis. And that is the first Amritam we have inherited, and we are indeed Amritasya Putra. We also inherited a vast reservoir of Smritis and Puranas, which are different from mythologies of other civilizations. If you go to Greek mythology or European mythologies, they are virtually dead. But unlike those mythologies, our Smritis and Puranas have living vibrancy. And those characters in those mythologies do not have immortal values as Lord Rama and Bhagavan Krishna. Pick up that very moving and strong musical rendering by Vallabhacharya. That is Madhurashtakam, sung melodiously by M.S. Subbulakshmi. And what does it say? When you are Adaram, Vadanam, Nayanam, and Hasitam are all sweet, your environment is sweet. And when your heart is sweet, your Gamanam, that is your gait, that is also sweet. Your movements become sweet. Everything becomes sweet. That is Madhurashtakam. Or pick up Kambaramayana, that great Tamil epic where all about the chronicles of Lord Ram are narrated in their fullness, as if the poet Kamba had personally witnessed the Ramayana episodes. The spiritual elevation you experience while reading them, you will not get while reading any other epic in any other part of the world. The Mahabharata, again, is not a mere set of stories, but a garland of many flowers, namely dharma, faith, inquiry, ethics, critical values on good and bad, and higher visions of life, and a different level of moral life. The great Tamil epic, again, recite one more, called Silapadikaram, written by a Jain Muni called Ilangovadi. Silapadikaram combines narrations about places and people beyond the southern shores of a country and refers to the Vedas. Valmiki Ramayana itself has given birth to several narrations and versions. All of them are our second Amritam. The Bhagavad Gita is a jewel in the crown. Regardless of its critics, who on a contrite reading call it a caste or a Varna text, it's a basket of statements weaved beautifully on all of life. All of us, I think, are Arjunas, whether a believer or an agnostic, seeking our paths and solutions in the web of challenges we face every day. The concept of Dharma, drawn into all our conduct by Gita, goes beyond dogma or religion. Has it not entered deep into the minds and thoughts of people from far north to deep south, from northeast to west, that a vast sea of faithful people, drowned deep in the lore of Lord Krishna, sing and talk about this textbook as a book of life even today? Let this Amritam be added to our cup of tea every day, that our thoughts and conduct blossom as fragrant flowers and not suffocating prisons. What comparisons can be there between Narayaniyam of Narayana Bhattacharya, a poetic and religious rendering of exotic beauty, and those of Punthanamar, his contemporary? What great engagement can there be than drowning oneself into Kalidasa's Meghaduta and diving into the common treasures of our culture and affinities? There are 100 such treasure houses all over the country, in all languages. They hold and continue our national fabric together beyond other literatures of other civilizations. What brought the great king of Ujjain, Bhartrhari, along with Saint Pattinathar of Tamil Nadu, and to spend their time in a place called Tiruvadai Marudu. These are our other Amritams. What do we learn from these Amritams? How can each one of us can be a karma yogi, an enlightened contributor for oneself and for all, and not merely a karmachari for oneself? And that's a big question to be asked every day, every minute. So we learn along with this, we look at Bhagavad Gita, how to be a great friend, a Maitri. For with true friendship, beyond frontier, the soil of humanity gets rich. We learn too, again, how to practice forgiveness. It is said Krishna forgave 99 insults from Sisupala, hundreds were different. With forgiveness comes love, without conditions, and comes Shama Virasya Bhushana, that is patience, a great virtue for all accomplishments. How can we accomplish all of this as individual or as a nation if we do not understand and cultivate our samskaras? When it comes to individual, we talk about the Sthula Sarira and the Sukshma Sarira. As a nation, the Sthula Sarira is the geography, the resources, the material part of it. The Sukshma Sarira are the people. When the Sukshma Sarira knows the Sthula Sarira better and can impact on the Sthula Sarira, then what else remains? And that's what we are talking about. So we can probably then catalog all engagements, particularly very special for our great country, and treasures of knowledge, what's called the inner science of mind. The great teachers of inner science, compendiously called the science of the mind. The lessons, the rules, the guides, etc., on knowing our mind and conquering it. The first verse in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra talks about it. So from Buddha the Great to Patanjali and Tirumula to Jiddu Krishnamurti in a different plane, or contemporary, the great Sri Aurobindo or Ramana Maharishi, and many and many and many. So the inner science knowledge, or the science of yoga to our country, which is beyond doctrines, which is beyond scriptures, and which lifts up in the burdens of everyday existence, as profoundly as Bhakti-Madham, is another Amritam. Then the long line of those who danced in joy and bliss with bhakti in their hearts. Women and men who went beyond any text, Vedas or otherwise. The Nayanas of Shaiva faith, the Alvars of Vaishnava faith, the Basaveswara, the Akka Mahadevi, from Nandanath to Jnaneshwar to Narayana Guru and many, many. Their pearls of writings are perennial sources of being drawn to God or the Creator in any form you may like, and go beyond caste and other divisions. These are our other Amritams too. The word Panchajanya carries many stories, but symbolizes the victory blow emanating from the eternal conch of a dharmic features. One among the attributes of Lord Vishnu one among the attributes of the Lord in his Vishnu form. All our Amritams are the attributes of our samskaras. Ever fresh, ever living, ever ready to blend and breathe fresh with changing times. That's why we are all assembled here today. They are both clay and solid. Can you imagine a culture, a tradition, or a philosophy which can be both malleable but also solid? We have it. So our traditions, our culture, our philosophy, the wide range of them can be, if you give it to a potter, he can make a good pot. You can make a good image out of that. So it is clayish, but at the same time it is solid. It resists things which are not true. So in the mystical tradition of Jewish philosophy, there's something called descenders of the chariot. People who become alive to truth and consciousness. I think each one of us should be resolved to become the descenders of the chariot. What Bhagavan Krishna said, Sambhavam Yuge, in every Yuge I come as an avatar. I think it's important for us that we understand is much more, not merely as one avatar every Yuge. I think it's better considered that each one of us become Dharma incarnate. That is what Lord Krishna wants us to be. not merely an avatar which cannot be seen or which can be forgotten. So Dharma incarnate each one of us is a great fulfillment of the what called the call given in Bhagavad Gita. I will come back to Swami Vivekananda once again. Because he is somebody who can mesmerize you, as I said, in so many ways. And he talks about some of the aspects I am just sharing with you. He says, one, each nation is a type, physically and mentally. I talked about the Sthula Sarira and Sukshma Sarira. Each is constantly receiving ideas from others, only to work them into its type, that is along the national line. The time has not come for the destruction of types. All education from any source is complete with the ideas in every country. Only they must also be nationalized. What do you mean by not nationalization like bank nationalization? Only they must be nationalized, that is fall in line with the rest of the type of manifestations our country has produced. Number two, in each nation, man or woman represents an ideal, consciously or unconsciously being worked out. The individual is the external expression of an ideal to be embodied. The collection of such individuals is the nation, which also represents a great ideal. Towards that it is moving. And therefore, it is rightly assumed to understand a nation, you must first understand its ideal. For each nation refuses to be judged by any other standard than its own. Number three, when a kettle of water is coming to the boil, we watch the phenomena. You first find one bubble rising and then another and so on, until at last they join and a tremendous commotion takes place. The world is very similar. Each individual is like a bubble and the nation resembles many bubbles. Number four, books never make religions, but religions make books. We must not forget that. No book ever created God, but God inspired all the great books. And no book ever created a soul. We must never forget that. The end of all religion is the realizing of God in the soul. And that is the one universal religion. If there is one universal truth in all religions, I place it here in realizing God. Ideas and methods may differ, but that's the central point. So these very important statements given by what we may call another father of the nation, who liberated us from certain other shackles of the past. So while our nation has gathered all these amritams, it also fell prey to certain other ills common to other civilizations, social and economic inequality. Petty divisions of caste have overgrown as the weeds of hostilities. The community of religions we had is exposed to the hunger and thirst of control and dilution of Indic faiths and samskaras. The clash of faiths which darkened Europe for hundreds of years should not happen here. I believe that ahimsa, or non-violence as a mode of life, must have been one of the pursuits and features even the evolutionary process, whether you believe in Darwin or not. And this is embodied in our genes and consciousness. We abhor violence, even while it hangs around us. The moral blindness and the mental primitiveness of what is happening in Europe today between Russia and Ukraine tells us that when national samskaras die, nothing of civilizational value remains. Rule of law itself is a non-violent revolution. If we stop only glorifying our samskaras without addressing the ills and challenges of our times, or without acknowledging the diversities of our nation, the riches added to the Indian civilizational heritages by other faiths and beliefs, and how we have grown as a civilization by blends and bonds, we would still be away from continuing to be a great civilization. Today, we live under a constitution. The constitution is a garland of many dharmas relevant for a modern social order. It is not different from the amritams we have saw above in the fundamental sense. It's a binding text of a civilization and a blend or a bouquet of values and ideals. There are attempts to distort our history and to divide us. We can no longer remain mute. All of us must think and think. All of us must act to promote dignities of women, and while protecting our heritages, create new heritages for the rest of the world to follow. We also face, as I said, new technologies challenges from technology of our cultures and traditions. Therefore, we need to work hard to design new looms. Old looms are with us, we need to have new looms of a samskarams with a constitutional document and our age-old amrutams, which can give greater garments of bonds and endurance for a long time to come. When I was arguing before the Karnataka High Court during the recent hijab matter, I wrote a small piece of poetry in English. I would like to read it. I requested somebody to translate it in Malayalam. I think if it's read in Malayalam, probably you will get it better than when I read it in English. I hope somebody can do it. Let me complete with two stories. All of us, know about Tenali Ram, Birbal, all those stories are there. Nasruddin Shah is also one such character. So one day Nasruddin Khoja and a group of his neighbors were going somewhere together. They all rode upon their donkeys. When they came to a hill, Khoja noticed that his donkey was sweating. He got down from its back and whispered into his ear, "I am sorry that you are working so hard that you are sweating." His neighbors noticed Khoja and got down from his donkey's back and whispered into his ear. They were curious about this. "Khoja, what did you whisper to your donkey?" One of them asked. "I told my donkey that I was sorry that he had to work so hard that he sweated," answered Khoja. Then all his neighbors laughed, and one of them said, "Why did you do that? Donkeys do not understand human speech. They are not at all humans." He said, "What I do is what concerns me. I did what is expected of a human being, and I do not care whether or not he understood what I said." A great story. One more story. A man was walking through a forest when he saw a fox that had lost its leg. The man wondered how the fox was able to stay alive. Then he saw a tiger coming along with his game in its mouth. The tiger was feeding the fox. The tiger ate its fill and left the rest of the meat for the fox. The next day, God fed the same fox by the means of the same tiger. The man wondered at God's greatness and said to himself, "I too shall just take my rest with full trust that the Lord will provide me with all I need." He did this for many days, but nothing happened. God did not come. And it was almost at death's door when he heard a voice say, "Oh, you who are in the path of error, open your eyes to the truth. Follow the example of the life-giving tiger and stop imitating the disabled fox." The life-giving tiger is what we are talking about. Each one of us incarnate Bhagavad Gita. We must be the life-giving tigers. And let us all to be do so beyond the divisions which have been created in the past and the glorious future that we can create. So let me read that in English and it will help you see. I hope I have not taken your time. I call it the call of the motherland. O nation of great mind and thoughts, of past so long and cradles many, that nurtured knowledge of shades many, many. O nation of peoples with ancient roots, with entanglements thin and bosoms large. O nation that knows the dark divisions of faith and caste, like spider webs, can trick and trap. O nation of many tongues and cultures, faiths and creeds, in blends and bonds of fibers strong. Why bleed our minds? Why freeze our hearts? Why fence our homes with petty thorns? Swords once drawn are poisons strong. Words once dropped are slipping weeds. Fold all your clashes, fold all your noises. Little divides with constant chases can grow to seismic sizes quick. In composure do all things flourish. In common pursuits of common weal, little skirmishes dissolve. O nation of paths in duty drawn, in common resolve of love for all, let our oars do swing and hail all life. Thank you for your attention.